Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Game Over Ottawa for our very first trade reaction video because last night the Ottawa Senators acquired Linus Ullmark from the Boston Bruins. How are you feeling about that, Charlie?
Really good. Just to put it really simply, really good. We'll get into it with the return, obviously, but the price was a lot cheaper than I think pretty much everybody expected.
Definitely.
Um, Still don't know if there's going to be an extension worked on at all, or if Allmark's just going to play it out and see where it goes. But um, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I mean, I know how you feel. You messaged me last night, and I believe in full caps you said Staios cooked.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was going to say right now is that Steve Staios is cooking. Probably going to put that in the thumbnail for this video too. He is getting to work real early this offseason. Before we even get to the draft, he is putting his stamp on this team's roster, which is really exciting to see. And he's going to have a lot more work left to do too. Later in this video, we're going to also be discussing potential Jacob Chychrun mock trades because it seems like that is going to be the next piece of business that Staios will have to deal with, is deciding what he wants to do with Jakob Chychrun, what assets he would like to get back for him in a trade. But first, of course, the Ullmark trade, which we are both very happy about. I feel like it was pretty much almost the best case scenario for the Sens, other than the report that there isn't already an extension agreed upon. But of course, they're still going to be discussing that with Ullmark and his agent. And to be honest, considering what we gave up, I feel like even if Ullmark just plays the whole year here and then walks, it's not a bad trade. Like, I think it would still be a pretty good trade, even if that's what ends up happening, unless he totally stinks. But even if we don't get an extension, just because we only gave up the 25th pick, Kastelik, and then Korpisalo with 25% retained, I feel like if we were just trying to dump Korpisalo's contract, I would have expected that to cost at least the 25th overall pick, right? And then you get Ullmark in the same deal. So I was amazed at that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on. I feel like I prefer the Markstrom return,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, because
Um,
it's possible that the Devils miss the playoffs again and it ends up being like 11th, 12th overall pick.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I love it as a Sens fan. I do love it. I'm just like I'm that no one bid higher than that.
Yeah, that's weird to me. The other two
Kind of
teams that
shocked.
were reported as being interested still were Detroit and Vegas. And I have to think that they were probably just offering like second round picks, or maybe because Vegas probably doesn't even have their first. I'm sure they moved that at the deadline to whichever team, either like Calgary or San Jose. They made all those deals. So
Yeah,
those
that
teams
must have been
didn't
the Hannafin
have,
trade, right?
yeah, those teams didn't
Uh,
have similar picks to offer than what the Sens could with that late first, because the Detroit's own first round pick would be too high. It would be way higher value, and I guess they didn't want to give up
yeah.
that much for Ullmark.
Yeah, that would have been 15th for Detroit, I believe. And as far as Vegas goes, just to do our due diligence here. No, they actually Vegas does have their own
They
first
really
round pick
do.
this
Wow.
year
So
at
maybe that one is
19th,
close to
but
25th, 19th.
right, but they don't have their next two.
Okay, yeah. So it's probably important for them to keep that pick.
Yeah, so 24 or not, sorry, 25. In 2025, their first was traded for Thomas Hurdle, and their 2026 first was in the Noah Hannafin trade.
Right.
So they must be wanting to hold on to that pick.
But yeah, you would have to think that one of those teams, even if they weren't offering quite as much, they would be offering something where you wouldn't have to take a contract back like Korpisalo. That's what surprised me the most, is that we were
Yeah.
actually able to move Korpisalo in this deal. I thought that he was going to have to be moved in a separate deal, giving up more picks, or that if the Bruins were going to take him, that we were going to have to throw in like some second round, third round picks as well. But we didn't. Only the 25th overall, and Mark Kastelik, who's basically a contract dump. The Sens were looking to get rid of him for whatever they could. So I think this is an A plus trade in terms of the value.
Yeah, I can't imagine this trade working out to be a nightmare for the Sens. I mean, 25th overall, maybe Boston pulls another Pasternak out or
Yeah, if
something,
they
and
get the
then we
next
all feel
Pasternak.
silly.
Yeah,
But, like for what it is, yeah, like you're dumping most of Korpisalo's contract. You're still paying him $1 million for the next 4 years, but to get $3 million off the books every year, to have a real shot at, impressing Allmark, show him the 400,000 plus square foot IKEA, make him feel at home, give him that extension. Um, yeah, I really like it. And even, I mean, like Allmark's gonna have worse numbers than he did last year, and Corpusalo's gonna have better numbers than he did last year. But I hope people don't focus on that too much, just when they're looking at this trade on paper. Because whatever Corpusalo does in Boston, he would not have been doing in Ottawa. So, um, let's hope that, Allmark has a great season. And I mean, we'll get into this later on as well, but hopefully Staios continues to cook and addresses defense and fixes the defense, so Allmark actually has some help. And which I probably would assume would help him want to decide to extend or resign. But even if there were plans for it, he wouldn't be able to extend until July 1st, right? So we
Exactly.
wouldn't really even be able to hear about that for another week or so here. So,
Mm-hmm.
um,
All we would get at the most is just like an insider report saying like, oh yeah, there's an extension that's close, but we wouldn't be able
yeah.
to learn about it until July 1st.
And I don't know what you've seen on Twitter today and just online in general. I've seen conflicting reports. I couldn't tell you who reported them. I don't remember because I just scrolled way too fast. But I saw some people saying that Allmark waived his no move to come to Ottawa. I saw some people say that he removed Ottawa from his list when they signed Corpusalo because he figured, okay, well, there's their starting goalie. I don't have to worry about that.
Yep.
So I don't know if we're gonna get an official report on that. Um,
I think
because Sensen's been talking some shit about like to like Leafs fans and Kings fans and stuff, like just with the reports that Allmark wouldn't want to waive to go there, but does want to come to Ottawa for some reason. I don't know. I'm not sure.
yeah, I think Bruce Garrett's just gonna have to do some digging on that one, to try to find out what really was the case. I was actually just listening to the 32 Thoughts podcast, and Friedman mentioned what you said about Olmark not having the Sens on his no trade list because they had signed Corpusalo.
Oh,
What
okay.
the way he phrased it was though is that it's not certain. It's basically that he heard one executive came to him and was like, "Oh, all the reporting is that he waived his no trade to go to Ottawa, but this is what I think actually happened." Not necessarily that this person knew for sure, but it was like a bit of
Okay.
a conflicting report. So it's definitely up in the air as to
Hmm.
what the case was. And there was also Friedman also speculated that if that was the case and Ottawa was not currently on his no trade list, it's possible that if the Bruins waited past July 1st, he would have been able to update his list and put Ottawa on it. If he really didn't
Fair.
want to
Yeah.
go there. So, if that's the case, it could have created a sense of urgency for the Bruins too, to just move him before he could update his no trade list. And even if it wasn't to put the Sens on it, maybe he would put one of those other teams like Detroit or Vegas who was interested.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, well, I don't even know if this is one of those things where we can even say we'll find out. Maybe we just never learn what really happened. It's not that big of a deal, I don't think. It's a fun little bit of information to go along with the trade, but the fact is, Linus Ullmark is in Ottawa, and Sens fans are psyched. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think I don't know how you felt about this. I brought this up on a previous episode where I said it feels like the asking price for Ullmark is going to be like Chychrun and pick 25.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now there's a whole other move that can be done with Chychrun. There's a million other moves that can be done. Honestly, like none of the pieces that I thought were going out other than pick 25 went in this trade. So Steve's got a lot of work to do still, like a lot of pieces that he can use. Because obviously there's a lot of teams calling about Chychrun. There's that deal with Philly that's apparently set up that again, I'm bad at this. I don't remember who I saw said this, but apparently like, there's a defenseman involved and it's not the one you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you know who said that.
It was a Flyers reporter, but I can't remember
Was it
the
a Flyers
name.
reporter? Okay. So is that going to be Brandstrom? Is it going to be Shabbat? Like, what's the deal there? So there might be we might be in for like a really busy summer,
Definitely.
given how things are going.
Yeah, in terms of how we thought that Chychrun might be included in the Olmark trade, I'm really glad that he wasn't. Obviously, just because it's a cheaper price for the Sens, but also
Mhm.
like giving up that 25th pick, you have the opportunity to then get a similar pick back for Jacob Chychrun. So you give up
Yeah.
that pick to get your goalie and to even clear Korpisalo's contract too, and then you can replace that pick, which is awesome, in a separate deal. I think that could work out really nicely, which we'll get into a little bit later here with potential mock trades for Jakob Chychrun.
Yeah. How long until we start getting concerned about an Ullmark extension? Do we get concerned about it? Do we just stay happy about this? Like, what's the outlook here?
Personally, I'm not going to get concerned about it at all. I think people will start to get concerned when it gets, 5, 6, 7 days after July 1st if he isn't signed to an
Yeah.
extension yet. But personally, I wouldn't be concerned just because, like I said earlier, even if this is just a 1-year rental and he doesn't want to stay, as long as he performs well or even decently, it's a good trade, because I would have thought that we would have had to give up as much value as we did with that late first round pick just to dump Korpisalo in the first place. So then to me, it almost feels like we kind of got Ullmark for free, even though that's not really what happened. It feels kind of like they just took Korpisalo for free. It's like the first was the cost for Ullmark, but in my mind, I would have thought that a first would be the cost to dump Korpisalo, but they were merged into one trade without the Sens giving any extra value. So just getting out from that, what is it, like 12 or 10 million or whatever that's left without the retained salary on Korpisalo is huge, because
Yeah, it'd be 12. Yeah.
because otherwise the option probably would have been a buyout or paying another team more assets to take Korpisalo if Boston wasn't willing to do it. So that's huge, and I think that even if Ullmark does leave, then at least you have tons of cap space and you can figure out another goalie move maybe in free agency next year if Ullmark doesn't want to stay.
Yeah. That's the thing, right? Like, and again, I've been going back and forth on this, trying to figure out if I legitimately do think this, or if I'm just so not used to the Sens making really good moves on paper anyway. Like, even if Ullmark walks, this still feels like a good trade.
I agree.
So yeah,
I'll
really
put it
impressed
this way.
with Steve.
I'll put it this way too. I'm a no life and I play too much of the EA Sports manager mode for NHL.
Yeah, me too.
And
Me
I
too.
went in as the Sens a couple days ago, and what I did was I gave the Bruins their first round pick back plus Tyler Klevin for Ullmark, and then I simply bought out Korpisalo and took the 8-year cap penalty. And I thought that that was going to be too unrealistic, like that was too good of a scenario for the Sens to happen in real life, but then they did way better than that. So that's awesome. It totally like blew my expectations out of the water with what Staios was able to do in this deal.
I'll remind me when we're doing our Chychrun mock trades. I'll tell you what my Chychrun trade in NHL 24 was.
Yeah, I have one of those
a few days
too.
ago I booted up a new franchise mode. Sens back-to-back cup winners in 28 and 29, by the way,
Oh,
just for the
nice.
record.
I haven't gone in
So
that far yet, but in what was it, 25, 26, we lost in the final to the Dallas Stars. So, hey,
oof,
we both made the Sens a pretty good team in imaginary land.
that's all that matters sometimes
hmm
when you're a fan of this team.
Hey,
Sometimes you
but
have to go to imaginary land.
while we're talking about imaginary land, do you want to get into our potential Jakob Chychrun mock trades?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's
So,
do it.
for the teams that we decided to pick for this, it was mostly based off of a David Pagnotta report from about 10 days ago, where he said the Flames, the Predators, the Flyers, Maple Leafs, and Capitals have been linked to Jakob Chychrun. So we used some of those teams as possibilities here. Don't
Mhm.
know if any of those will actually end up being the team that gets Chychrun. There could be a mystery team that comes in and ends up taking him, or there could end up being one of those teams. I don't know. So that's what we based it off. There hasn't been like a ton of really obvious rumors about Jakob Chychrun. It's just kind of just team names being thrown out there and we don't really know. So we could be totally wrong, but we came up with a lot of options for what we think the deal could look like. And Bruce Garrioch had reported that the asking price is basically a first round pick plus a second round pick, or a first round pick plus a solid prospect. So that's kind of what I based most of my deals on. It threw me off a little bit when he reported that, because in a lot of the deals I tried to get a roster player back, especially like a right defenseman if the team had one to spare. But I changed my deals around a little bit to sort of reflect the more rumored asking price, which is going a little bit more towards futures. So which team should we start with? We both have mock trades for a number of teams, so you can sort of give me yours, and then I'll give you mine. Maybe they'll end up being similar too. But which team do you want to
Sure.
do first?
I do want to say real quick also just what my Chychrun NHL 24
Oh
trade
yeah,
was.
yeah.
It's a two-parter though. It's a two-parter because
Ooh.
you traded for Ullmark. For some reason, when I booted up, they had Swayman on the block.
Oh.
So I traded Tarasenko and Korpisalo for Swayman
Oh my
and a
God.
third.
That's some
Uh,
silliness.
and then I packaged that third with Chychrun to Tampa for Brandon Hagel, who was
Oh my God.
just for his RFA rights.
Right.
Um, which ended up going pretty well. Ended up going, it's pretty good. Pretty
Mm-hmm.
good.
That would be crazy.
And for the record, in 2028, Jake Sanderson scored the Game 7 double OT
Oh.
cup winning goal, by
Oh
the
my
way. Just
God.
just so everyone knows,
That's like straight out of a dream right there.
right? It was so great. Ridley Gregg has turned into a perennial 30 goal, 80 point guy, by the way. Just so
Wow.
we're all clear on what's going to happen in real life for sure.
Yep,
So,
exactly. That's his ceiling.
um,
That's the minimum
uh,
expectation that I have now for him.
yeah, if you want to know how much of a nerd I am, I have spreadsheets that I keep track of like my franchise modes on. It's
Nice.
bad. Anyway, so I have, let me see, how many teams do I have? One, two, three, four, I have five different teams, two of which I have two different trades.
Okay.
Um, so I have two trade. We'll start with the Flames. I have two trades with the Flames, and neither one makes sense. So I was like scouring through all the Flame stuff that I could find, and I just don't see how a Chychrun trade works for them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they are in a position where current ownership like just is refusing to fully rebuild. They'll retool, I guess, but they aren't going to go into full rebuild mode. So God, these are so bad. Um, so I'll start out with so there's one where I kind of followed that hint that we got based on the report that they're looking to get just like futures for Chychrun. So I have one trade that's for futures and one trade that's basically where Ottawa's buying. Um so I'll go into the first one that is the least likely to happen. I just wanted to will this one into existence. So I have the Senators acquire Mackenzie Weegar for Jacob Chychrun, Matthew Joseph, and Ottawa's second in 2024. Um, which is pick 39, if I'm doing my math correctly. Should
I
be pick
think so.
39, I believe. So
Something
pick
like that.
39, Jacob Chychrun and Matthew Joseph for Mackenzie Weegar. I don't think this makes sense at all for a couple of reasons. Number one is why would the Flames move Weegar at all? Like unless he's like pissed off there. It does, well, not that it matters. He signed at 6.25 forever. So he's on a good contract for a long time. Um, and they like so the other thing too is with Uyghur, he's played a ton on the left side. He is a right shot defenseman from Nepean, bring him home. But he didn't play a ton on the right side this past season. So on natural stat trick, he only played 27 minutes of 5-on-5 on the right side. So he's been playing a ton of left time. And the weird thing is too, his 27 minutes of 5v5 on the right, on the left was Chris Tanev, who's a right shot defense. So I don't know, none of it makes sense at all. Um,
I guess it's because
but yeah,
Calgary had Uyghur, Tanev, and Rasmus Anderson all as right handy, and you wouldn't want to have
yeah,
one of them on the third pairing, right? So I guess Uyghur was the best option to play as offside.
that's true. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean, Uyghur's just he's incredible. He's like a dream trade target. He's not even exactly what the Sens need on the right side, just in that he's great defensively. He's great defensively, and he scored 20 goals
He
last
scored a
year.
lot of goals,
Um,
yeah.
he's so good. I don't think this would ever happen, but like I'm trying to load up on it, right? Chychrun Joseph in 39th overall for him. Um, so he scored 52 points, 20 goals. So like his trade value is higher than it's ever been. And I don't want Flames fans or Sens fans, like Sens fans, like obviously this trade isn't going to happen. This is ridiculous. This is just me dreaming. But Flames fans as well, like don't like try not to let your expectations of him skyrocket. He had never scored double-digit goals before, and he scored 20. Um, so I don't think that's going to happen again. I think he's probably going to be sticking around that 40-point mark rather than 52. Like he'll probably stick around being like a 8 to 10 goal, about 30 assists kind of guy, was just phenomenal, phenomenal defensive play. I think he'd be an incredible, incredible acquisition for the Sens. It won't happen, but also shout out to our friend of the show from the Zoomcast, Louis, who, if you look at his player cards on his own system, LB Hockey, if you look at Mackenzie Weegar, um, if I just punch it in really quick,
Is
one
this
thing
gonna
that Louis
be
has,
the ideal line mates?
ideal line
Yep.
mates, number three, Jake Sanderson.
Oh yeah, that would
So,
be perfect. Oh my god.
right, and then you get to reunite Shabbat and Zub. Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
That would be a
it's like,
dream.
it would never happen. The only reason it would ever happen is Calgary's being weird, which they have been with trades in the past. I've seen it, but like, no, there's zero reason for them to move on from Mackenzie Weegar at all. I just had to talk about him because he's so good.
Uyghur is
He's so
definitely
good.
a guy that if Calgary had any inclination of maybe moving him, you overpay. You give them like
Mhm.
whatever they want for him outside of anything like ridiculous on our end. That's he
Yeah.
would just be an absolutely perfect acquisition. But yeah, Calgary, it's hard to say what they're gonna do because they should be going full rebuild, but it seems like they might not be. Which
hmm
is why I didn't really make a proper mock trade for Calgary, but what I was thinking was Rasmus Anderson has 2 years left on his deal as a similar cap hit to Chychrun. I don't think they would trade him straight up for Chychrun
hmm
just because I feel like it's kind of unlikely that Chychrun would extend with the Flames. But I kind of thought about maybe you trade Chychrun somewhere else for picks and prospects, and then flip those to the Flames for Rasmus Anderson if he potentially might not want to sign there at the end of his deal. I feel like that could be something that could be done with the Calgary Flames.
Yeah, I did look at Rasmus Anderson pretty consistently, like pretty deeply, looking into this kind of stuff. But he's, he perfect second pairing right-handed defenseman, but he's like all out offense, right? Like he doesn't have the greatest defensive metrics. So I like it. I think that, if you move, if it's, obviously, like you said, they probably wouldn't do one for one, but even if you throw in a little something extra there, tricking for Anderson, like, I think it improves the team at the very least as far as like just getting your lineup set.
Just at
Um,
least balancing the left and right side. Like
yeah,
he might be similar to Chychrun in that he has a lot of offensive skill, maybe leaves a little bit desired on defense, but it would at least help with that left and right balance. And
yeah,
for 2 more years, he has a similar cap hit to Chychrun, so you wouldn't be paying too much money until he needs the extension.
yeah. I still like it. I still think that would be a move in the right direction. Um, and I think he's a lot more likely to get to, I think that's a much more likely target to pull away from Calgary than Uyghur. I don't think they would ever move Uyghur. If they did, it would be in the next few years because he has a no move that kicks in 2027, I believe.
Oh wow.
So Uyghur, yeah, in 27. And then Anderson actually, his modified no trade, his 6 team list kicks in this coming July 1st. So if Calgary was going to move him, they'd probably do it very, very soon.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind
Interesting.
of interesting. If Anderson is moved in the next like day or two after we release this, that's kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I'll give you my Chychrun to Calgary for futures deal that also won't happen.
Okay.
Um, so when you're looking at Calgary as far as like futures, they're not going to be moving their uh their first round pick this year unless it's for something huge, and I don't think Chychrun's going to count as that. Calgary is the ninth overall pick. That's just not going to be in play unless the Sens include seven and they move down. Um, so when you're looking at the Flames top end prospects, they're not moving Wolf. They're not moving Connor Zary. And I don't think they're going to be moving Matt Coronado, but I included him in this deal anyway.
Mm-hmm.
With the asking price of a first and a second or a first and a prospect, Coronado's too good to ask for, a first on top of that. So I said Matt Coronado and the 2024 Dallas second round pick, which Calgary currently has, and that would be pick number 62. So at the very tail end of the second round. So almost a third round pick with Coronado. Coronado, 13th overall in 21, I believe. Um, it doesn't really make sense either. This trade, Coronado scored 42 points in 41 games in the AHL at 21 years old. Like, that's a piece they're going to want to hold on to. Um, he was drafted in 21, I believe, played at Harvard for 2 years, did really, really well. He had 9 points in 34 games with Calgary this year as well in the NHL. Um, so I just don't if Flames fans are watching this and they're like laughing at me for these two mock trades, I don't blame you. I just don't see Calgary as a good fit for Chychrun. Um, Despite that, I did two mock trades because I was like, let me talk about Mackenzie Weegar a little bit.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree that I'm not really sure about the fit, which is why I didn't really do a proper one for Calgary. But if they really wanted to
yeah,
give up a prospect for Chychrun, you're right that Coronado I think would be the one to go for from the Sens perspective. Uh,
yeah,
a right winger with some offensive talent, potentially replace Giroux in the future. But yeah, I think it's unlikely that Calgary ends up being the team to
yeah,
give up notable futures for Chychrun.
yeah. I feel like Wolf, Coronado, and Zary are all going to be super untouchable, and the drop off past them is enough. And it's like, hey, well, I
Yeah,
just
then
don't see a
we're
trade for futures here.
yeah, then we're not interested in any of the other prospects really.
Yeah, it's like the three good prospects are untouchable, and you have the ninth overall pick, none of which are going to be involved in the Chychrun trade. I don't see it happening.
Yeah.
So
Do you want to go to another Canadian team in the Toronto Maple Leafs who may be interested in Chychrun?
sure, let's piss off some Leaf fans here.
Yeah. I'll go first on this one. What I had
Sure.
originally written down before the Garriott report that we were more looking at picks and prospects. What I wrote down was a roster player and a pick. I put Timothy Liljegren and the 23rd overall pick. Um,
Hmm.
it would be just good to get that second pair right hand D. I think he would slot in nicely. But if they have to go the prospect route, I put Topi Niemela because he's also a right handy. The one thing about him is that he's sort of a small, really offensive minded guy. And I feel like if the Sens aren't interested in keeping around Brandstrom, Niemela might not be a guy that they target because he's maybe kind of similar, just on the right hand side. And also, if we end up drafting Zane Parek, you don't need a guy like Topi Niemela. The
That's
right-handed
true.
offensive D,
Yeah.
but those are the assets that I would be most interested in from Toronto. The thing about Liljegren though is I think Toronto also really needs right D. They're definitely going to spend a lot of money in free agency on at least one of those top
Yeah.
guys that's available. So I don't know if they would see Liljegren as expendable. Most of their D are left-handed, I believe. So he's kind of like the one good right-handed D that they have. Don't know if they would want to move him, but if we were trading Chychrun within the division, that's what the asking price would be for me.
I'm asking for more.
Oh yeah,
Um,
that's fair. That's
yeah.
totally fair.
Um, I feel like, yeah, the Leafs feel like they're in a similar position to the Sens when it comes to defense in that they're looking for the same thing, right? Like they're probably both looking for that top four right-handed defenseman. Like the Leafs feel like a team that might give Brett Pesce an unbelievably high, uh, payout for on July 1st, or are probably going to be in on Chris Tanev. Like whoever the Sens talk to in free agency, I think the Leafs are going to be talking to the exact same right shot defenseman. Um, so because of that, I just went purely futures. I also included the 23rd overall pick in this year's draft. But then to add to it, I went with who I believe is probably their one, two, three, four, maybe their number five prospect in Fraser Minton.
Okay.
Um, just because I think like number one obviously gonna be Matthew Nyes, and then like I guess like I mean Nick Robertson's up there, Easton Cowan obviously is super up there. Joseph Wall is probably still considered a prospect at this point, sort of.
Depending on if he
Um
gets that extension, right? Was that confirmed yet?
yeah,
I think it's still
uh
rumored at the time of this recording. Then he
I
becomes
believe
just like
so.
their starting goalie with that money.
Yeah. Um so with Fraser Minton, this is a high asking price, but I'm also, like in this scenario, I'm trading Jacob Chychrun to a divisional rival.
Mm-hmm.
And it would probably require, Chychrun plus something else. It all depends on, because a lot of these teams might be like, we're not touching Chychrun unless we get an extension ready, in which case all of a sudden the 2024 picks are useless. So, if it's 2025 third you throw in there, a second, and maybe then the Leafs throw in a third, like something just, just like whatever it takes to like basically like Chychrun, the 23rd pick, and then Mitten are like the main pieces, and then you just throw in whatever else you need for Ottawa to maybe like bump it up just a touch to even it out. Um, so Mitten had 48 points in 43 games, split between Kamloops and Saskatoon. It's not like, so, 48 points in 43 games. It's not the most impressive offensive showing from a player who is 2 years removed from his draft. Like, this was his 19-year-old season in the CHL. Um, but he's got a phenomenal two-way game. And I think he's got like a really, really solid shot at being like a legit middle six center. Um, I kind of see him as, like as close to a sure thing as a really good all-around defensive minded third line center. I kind of look at him as like kind of a Shane Pinto in that, like, I think he's got a really good shot of being that, like reliable third line center who, if you need to move up to the second line, you're going to be all right. Obviously, this is years away from him developing, becoming a full-time NHLer, but I do see that potential in him. But again, he's not nearly as far along as like a Pinto is or someone like that in the NHL. So you kind of have to balance it with the first round pick. I think the late first, just to just to cover some of that potential risk with getting a draft or recently drafted player. He was a second round pick, so that kind of matches up with the whole first and second, first and decent prospect. I don't see this trade happening because then the Leafs have Riley, Chychrun, and who would their other left-handed D on that
McCabe.
side there.
Although I think McCabe has been playing the right hand side as a lefty.
Yeah, so it doesn't really help the Leafs. Um, yeah, so again, I don't know if this happens either. It doesn't really make a ton of sense for either team. If this happened, I wouldn't be upset about it, even if the Leafs had like, an extension in place for Chychrun. Um, but yeah, like again, looking at it, right, like the Leafs don't seem like a great spot for Chychrun just as far as their need. Same kind of thing for Calgary, but it's still fun putting these together anyway.
Yeah, the Flames and Leafs, both in that Pagnotta report, were the two that I was like, yeah, you're reporting them, so I guess I'll make a mock trade about it, but
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
really see the fit that much. But if they did want Chikrin and we got something similar to either of the things that we proposed here, I would be pretty happy. I think those would be good options
yeah,
for the Sens if we were able to get those assets in return, for
definitely,
sure. Um, from there, I feel like the rest of the teams that were rumored are teams that I could actually see the fit for Chikrin a little bit more.
for sure. Yeah,
Before we move on to the next one, though, I guess I'll also qualify that in pretty much all of my mock trades, I included a current first round pick in this year's draft. But there is the potential that Chikrin doesn't get traded until after July 1st, so that a team can work out an extension or closer to July 1st. Basically, all of my mock trades are saying, like, oh, this is if he gets traded before or during the draft. It's possible
right.
that he
Yeah,
doesn't, but you can basically then just take my mock trades, replace the current first round pick with next year's first round pick, like top 10 protected for that team, and then I would say
yeah,
that's
yeah,
probably similar value for most of them.
yeah. That's very fun because out of my four remaining mock trades, I only have one first round pick coming back.
Okay.
So
That
that's
works
kind
for
of
you
fun.
then.
Yeah,
So we
which works
have
for me, but
some different
also
ones.
probably isn't realistic if the Sens are looking for a first. So we'll see.
Mhm.
We'll see.
Gotta have options though. Gotta have multiple options. If other teams are not really looking at giving up firsts, there
Yeah.
has to be
Yeah.
other things for Steve Staios to consider. But gonna throw it to another team. Do you want to go with Philadelphia because they've been really
Sure.
rumored to be making a deal with the Sens? And like you mentioned earlier, there was the one report that their trade that is in the works is not about the defenseman that everyone thinks it's going to be, which would
Hmm.
obviously be Chychrun, but they might still be interested in Chychrun anyway. What do you think the
That's
Flyers
true.
would offer for him?
I have two for the
Okay.
Flyers. One where it's basically the exact same thing as the Flames. I'm offering the exact same thing: Jacob Chychrun, Matthew Joseph, and a second round pick. This time for Travis Konechny. Um,
Okay.
it's a lot to offer. But I think that's what it would take to get it done. And in this scenario, I specifically said it's gonna be the 2025 second round pick for Ottawa. Both Konechny and Chychrun will have extensions worked out. This trade would happen like a week into July or something. Um, so Konechny has had back-to-back 30-goal seasons. He does have a bit of a track record for not being the healthiest, but so does Chychrun. Um, and I do think like bringing in Konechny is going to create a lot of cap issues for as far as like fixing the defense goes. So it's not like, the best trade or the most realistic, but like it would be fun. It'd be a lot of fun.
I agree. I was very drawn to the Chychrun for Konechny concept just because they're both 1 year left, and it just kind of seems like if neither of them are going to sign with their current teams, why don't you switch them for each other and see if they'll sign with their
Mhm.
new teams, especially since Konechny did play junior with the 67s, right? If I remember correctly, when they
He
were
did,
when they
first
were really
overall pick.
bad, right?
Yeah, the 67s had their stacked team with like Toffoli, CC,
He
Mrazek,
came in like right after that, didn't he?
Shane Prince. Yeah, they all left. They all graduated from the OHL. They were awful, like awful. Had the first overall pick, took Konechny. Then that next season, they were awful again, but they had Travis Konechny. So, my mom and I went to a ton of games that season. Both those seasons. Those are the seasons that they were actually in Canada because they were
Yeah, they were playing in the CTC
renovating.
for a bit.
Yeah, they were renovating Lansdowne. So, um, yeah, just a really empty building with a really awful, awful team. But you got to see Travis Konechny do some like really impressive stuff as a 16-year-old, as a rookie in the OHL. And then turned it around, made the playoffs. Then they were bad again. And I think they flipped him to Sarnia for like a million picks, which was a sad day because then the team was bad and they didn't have Konechny. But I mean, that's also just me being really selfish. I was like, so remember in the forwards episode, and I was like, I want them to sign Tyler Toffoli because I grew up watching him on the 67s. It's the exact same
It
thing. It's
is,
just good
yeah.
players that were on the 67s.
Yep. I think a lot of people would like to
Yeah.
see Konechny back in Ottawa. Like you said, though, the problem is the cap situation because he would probably cost a lot more than like any other asset that we would be bringing in a Chychrun trade
Yeah.
or even signing in free agency potentially.
He's making what, like 5.5 now for his last year, so he's probably gonna be looking for 7.5,
At
8.
least, yeah, which is tough.
Yeah.
I feel like you could maybe make it work if Claude Giroux would take a big pay cut for next year, to try to improve the team.
Yeah.
But that's a huge assumption. You can't plan for that to happen unless he like agrees to it ahead of time, and that's just also wishful thinking from me as a fan. That's probably not something
Yeah.
super realistic to happen.
And you got to prepare for that, like, 2 million plus pay bump Allmark's going to get if he resigns.
Yeah,
So,
as well as still holding on to 1 million from Corpusalo for 4 more years.
yep. Yep.
So that's the tough
So,
part about potentially acquiring Konechny. Although if they did do it in a trade for Chychrun, I would be ecstatic. I would get super excited about that for sure.
yeah, if both teams have found out that they're not going to resign, see what happens.
Yeah.
One for one swap, 1 year each. It's kind of fun. That's kind of a really
Hmm.
fun experiment. I
And if
like it.
neither of them want to sign or either of them don't want to sign, then you flip them at the deadline, right? And then you get your future
Yep.
assets that you didn't get in the summer.
Yeah, except the Sens won't do that because they're going to be in the playoffs,
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
right? Yeah.
Um, what I did for Philadelphia, I was thinking you have to try to get either, if you're going for a prospect, you have to try to get either Bonk or Bobby Brink, one of those two,
Hmm.
which according to the Athletic, that's their second and third best prospects. Obviously, Matvey Michkov being number one. I never want
Yeah.
to just go straight to a team's top prospect. In mock trades like this, especially for a player with 1 year left on his deal, second and third best prospects are also a bit of a stretch.
Really tough. Yeah.
Depending on how good the prospect pool is, which the Flyers is pretty good. So maybe it's a little bit wishful thinking to try to get one of them. But I think if they would be willing to move either of these guys, if you got them plus like the Panthers first round pick, which is 32nd, basically a second round pick, or just an actual second round pick on top of one of those guys, I think that would be
Hmm.
quite good. I, I like Bonk was recently drafted just last year, so I think it's less likely that they would want to move him. But Bobby
Hmm.
Brink, I do wonder about because I think he was often in Torts' doghouse during his rookie season. He put up pretty good numbers overall, but I remember him getting scratched a ton or being on the fourth line just because Torts didn't like him. And I do wonder if Danny Briere and Torts are on the same page or not. If they are on the same page, maybe Torts just says like, I'm not really going to continue to give this guy much ice time unless he really changes his game, and maybe they say, okay, we'll just move him out in a trade and use his value. So I do wonder about Bobby
Yeah.
Brink.
Yeah. My follow-up on my Flyers is actually, I'm surprised compared to your asking price because I also included Oliver Bonk as like a prospect, and I stuck with him. You probably started with Bonk, right? And then you kind of were like, let's
Yeah,
move that down a little bit.
exactly.
So, I love where you're at. I remember because Bobby Brink would have been he was early second round, right? Like, he was right around where Pinto was taken, I think,
Yep,
right?
he was either right before or right after.
Um, so I like that a lot. Um, I think this is probably my most realistic one. I have Chychrun going to Philly for Oliver Bonk and Scott Lawton because it feels like it's a done deal that Scott Lawton's going to be an Ottawa Senator.
It seems like it.
Um, and like I think this is my most realistic trade. It's a little bit low on the it's like basically it's a first and like a depth center, which isn't great. Um, but uh,
I'd be happy with it though.
I would take it. I just because all the reports of like the Sens moving down from 7 to 12 in a deal with the Flyers is scaring me. So I
Hmm.
refuse to do that. I
I was
refuse
trying
to.
to, hey, I was trying to make a mock trade that made sense for moving down from 7th to 12th, but including Chychrun in that, I couldn't figure out the value because if we're
No.
moving down 5 spots, they need to be giving us extra value. But if we're also giving them Chychrun, then you have to include the asking price for Chychrun on top of that too. So, like,
Yeah.
maybe they could be two separate deals or maybe all put together into one deal, but starting as two separate deals, maybe that could make it easier to visualize. But I couldn't figure out the
Yeah.
value on that.
If it was like Brandstrom and pick 7 for Bonk, Lawton, and 12. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that kind of thing,
Hmm.
but not when there's a name as big as Chychrun or bigger.
And I don't think
I
that
don't
they
think that
would
makes
give up
sense.
a prospect like Bonk just to go up 5 spots in the draft. I think
No, Bonk
if
was
they're giving
great
him up, they
last
have to
year.
be getting a big player like Chychrun.
Yeah. Do you have Bobby Brink's numbers by any chance, like for this past
I
season?
can pull them up fast as fuck.
Okay. Because for Bonk, he had 67 points in 60 games with London. He also had 16 points in 18 playoff games with the Knights, who, by the way, they only lost 2 games in the playoffs,
Yeah.
in the OHL playoffs.
They destroyed the opponent in the finals too. I can't even remember. It's so bad that I can't even remember who the hell the other team was, but they were
Was it
like blowing
Oshawa?
them out. Yeah, I think Oshawa. They were blowing them out every game in the finals. So,
Crazy. Except the one time where Oshawa had a huge lead and blew it and
oh
lost an
yeah, yeah,
OT.
they blew like a 6-1
Um,
lead or something.
yeah, this just reminded me of the year that the 67s had that dream team with Marco Rossi and Jack Quinn, and uh they swept the first 3 rounds. They were up 2-0 in the final. Um Mikey DiPietro gets hurt, and then they lost the next 4.
Yeah,
So imagine being 14-0 in the playoffs and then losing in the next 4.
brutal, absolutely brutal.
Oh,
That's like close to what the Panthers almost did, just being having like no troubles all playoffs and then almost blowing it. But
yeah.
obviously they did pull it off in the end. I got Bobby Brink's stats in
Okay.
57 games with the Flyers this season. He had 11 goals and 23 points in total, and he also played 13 games in the AHL, and he was point per game, exactly 13 points in the AHL
Okay.
too. So he's like on the fringe of getting close to being like a second liner, I would say. Like that 23 points in
Yeah.
57 games is good third line production, and obviously he has the point
Hmm.
per game type production in the AHL. So if the Sens did acquire him, I would expect him to probably be third line, maybe second line if he's able to develop a little bit as the season goes on. But
Yeah.
I think he's a solid piece. He's not like an amazing prospect to bring in, but I would be happy with getting him and an additional asset as well.
Yeah, I wouldn't be thrilled if he's the main piece coming back in a chicken trade, but like, what are you gonna do sometimes, I guess.
Yeah. Beggars can't be choosers always. It's like
Yeah,
we
exactly.
want our prospect and our pick, but we might not necessarily get like the number one prospect that we want from every team. Even though
For
Brink
sure.
is still near the top of their prospect pool, so it would be a good option.
Yeah.
And yeah, you mentioned Scott Lawton a lot. I was toying with having him in my mock trades. I do think it just seems like it's inevitable that he will be an Ottawa Senator, so he might slip in there somewhere. And I was also wondering about Morgan Frost. He signed 2 more years at 2 million. I think he's another player that was kind of in and out of Torts' doghouse. It could be another situation
Hmm.
where they just move on from him if they don't think he's going to fit with Torts' system anymore as a young guy. So you just move him while he has value, but but I couldn't really figure out where to fit them into my mock trades. So I went a little more simple and went with the prospect plus a pick.
Yeah. I also just had this thought now, just for the record, for people who are watching, who are maybe, thinking that we're asking for too much from Chychrun. Just remember that, whatever that was, 16 months ago, he was traded for a first and 2 seconds. Now, keep in mind that is what Ottawa paid, but so far we are both asking for considerably less than that, right? So I think we are keeping it fairly realistic here.
I think so,
So
especially because it was the 12th overall pick that Arizona got for
yeah,
Chychrun. We're not going to be getting a first round pick that high. It's going to be much later, and we're not going to be getting 2 second round picks or whatever it was, or a second and a third. It's just going to be, I think it was two
yeah,
seconds. It'll be
yeah,
it'll
it
be
was.
one or a prospect equivalent of a second round pick. So
Mhm.
it's definitely less.
Yeah,
And
yeah. I
again,
think
again, if Chychrun does end up getting moved after the draft and the team can lock in an extension with him right away, that just helps the value, I think.
for sure, for sure. Yeah.
What team should we go to next?
So I have two remaining.
Is it Washington and Nashville?
It
That's
is
good because that's what I have.
okay. Perfect.
I have one other one too, which is what I did in NHL GM mode, but I'll get to that last because it's
Okay.
probably unrealistic. But we'll do how about
Cool.
Washington?
Sure. Let's do Washington. This one was the toughest for me to put together. This one I had a really tough time with it just because, like, I'm looking at the Caps roster and I'm just not interested in most of it.
Mhm.
Um,
Which, hey, if they're looking
so
at prospects, that helps at least. You don't need to be picking
yeah,
someone off of their roster.
yeah. So the trade I went for, this is by far the most I'm asking for as far as chicken goes, as far as just like chicken for so many assets. So my trade is Jacob Chychrun to the Washington Capitals for Trevor Van Riemsdyk, Washington's first this year, 17th overall, and Vegas's second this year, 51st overall.
That is very similar to what I originally had, but then I ended up changing on
Okay.
mine. So let's go with your rationale on that one.
So looking at the Caps defense core, because let's be real, looking at their forwards, I'm not interested. Who do they have at forward? They have Ovechkin, he's never leaving. They got Dubois, Wilson, TJ Oshie. I don't think he's going to want to move. I think he's probably closing in on retiring pretty soon, and I think he's just going to want to play it out there,
Yeah, it's a bunch of
probably.
old guys.
Yeah, Dylan Strome, they're not going to move him. And then you're just kind of getting into like Sonny Milano, Nick Dowd, Michael Scarbosa, guys like that.
Mm,
Connor McMichael, he's going to stay. They're not going to trade his rights. Anyway, so forwards, that's done. Goaltending, they got Charlie Lindgren. They just traded away Kemper, like whatever. So on defense, John Carlson, he's going to stay. Rasmus Sandin is fun, but he's a lefty,
mm-hmm.
right?
Wouldn't need him.
Doesn't really fit with what the Sens are after. Nick Jensen, interesting. I don't love his contract, or like the amount that he's making. Because if I just look up really quick, just double check his contract.
Is
Yeah,
he
he's
like
making
3 million?
four.
Four.
He's
Okay.
making 405 for the next 2 years.
Oh, that's more
It's
than I
it's
thought.
too much, and he's not a top four defenseman, really. Then again, neither is TVR. Like Trevor Van Riemsdyk isn't. He's making 3 mil for the next 2 years. And I think you'd rather have him on your third pairing than your second, but like
Definitely.
it's
But still a good
still
addition.
yeah, it's still a good addition, but because of what he's worth, you get the 17th overall pick as well from Washington. Um, and then Vegas is second because for Washington, they don't have their own second. They just have Vegas' second for this year, which they acquired in the Mantha trade. They traded Mantha to Vegas for a second and a fourth. Um, yeah, and I don't know if Washington would do it. Because I think at this point Washington, I don't know. I feel like they got beat so bad by the Rangers that like it's just kind of clear that like okay, either we rebuild or we focus on getting Ovi the goal record. And I think they're focused on getting Ovi the goal record.
I think so.
So I don't know if they're going to look at Jacob Chychrun as helpful to that at all. They'd probably be more interested in holding on to their 17th overall pick, I'm assuming. But like if I'm making a trade with Washington and I'm only getting, like a third pairing defenseman back, I'm going to need some picks. I don't think this trade makes sense for Washington. I actually kind of like this deal if this is what happens for Ottawa. I think it's a useful move. They don't even necessarily have to use that 17th overall pick. They might find another trade to use that in, but yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for Washington, I don't think, but this was the trade that made the most sense for me from the perspective of Ottawa.
Yeah, so I like it too. What I had originally gone with was the 17th pick plus either Van Riemsdyk or Jensen. So very similar, very similar. But what I pivoted to was because of the prospect ask instead of maybe adding salary in a roster player
Mm,
was Washington actually does have a couple of good right-handed D prospects. So what I ended up pivoting to was 17th overall plus Ryan Chesley, which is someone who most people won't know, but he was 37th overall, second round pick in the 2022 draft. He's been playing for University of Minnesota. Seems like a solid defensive shutdown guy. So if the Sens are going the prospect route, I think that's the guy to look at from Washington. And also, when I
okay.
was looking on the Athletics rankings of Washington's prospect pool, he was listed as their fifth best prospect. So it's not like we're taking their best guy. I feel like that's a reasonable
Right.
ask, is your fifth best prospect and a guy who fits a positional need for the Sens. So with their rumored asking price of specifically looking for a prospect, that's what I went with for Washington. Along the similar lines, though, of getting a right-handed D. And the other option is, if not Chesley, they also have Vincent Iorio. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, who's been playing for the Hershey Bears the last couple of years. He was also a second round pick 1 year earlier in 2021. Also a
Mhm.
big right-handed D. So I feel like adding either of those guys would be great. They could probably move into your third pair pretty quickly within either the next year or two, as well as getting that 17th overall pick. I would be really happy. This is kind of my like sleeper option of people don't really know Iorio or Chesley, and I'm not like experts on them, but I feel like they would be good organizational fits on top of getting a mid first round pick from the Capitals. I would be really happy with that.
I like that a lot. I was looking at their prospects as well, and yeah, like Ryan Leonard, they're not going to move. Andrew Crystal, to be honest with you, I'd never heard of him until I was making these mock trades. So I look him up. He was
He
20th
scored a lot of
overall.
points.
Or no, he wasn't. Never mind, I'm on the wrong point. He was 40th overall. My
Yeah,
bad. In last year's draft, second round, after that's so stupid. He went 40th overall after scoring 95 points in 54 games with Kelowna.
I remember being surprised that he was falling in last year's draft.
And this year, in 62 games with Kelowna, he scored 40 goals, 111 points.
That's insane.
So I was like, they're not going to
That's
move
probably a guy
him.
you hold on to.
Yeah. Ivan oh my God, I just butchered that. Ivan Miro Shnichenko was about half a point per game in the AHL. They're probably going to hang on to him. Hendrix Lapierre, they're probably going to hang on to him. It's just, like
It's a lot of
this
forward
isn't a
prospects
team.
at the top. So like
Yeah.
Chesley and Iorio are probably their best D prospects, but in terms of the whole ranking, they're like fifth, sixth in the depth chart.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
they're reasonable targets, especially because they have two guys. It's not like, oh, we're asking for your only good defense prospect. They have two. We could get either of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And like if Washington is just going to hold on to Ovi and just try and like surround him with some talent, they're not going to be trading off their players for picks. They're going to hang on to the prospects they already have, probably like that super high end one. So I think you've targeted, some smart ones there. Um, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out here. I don't see Chychrun as a fit for the Caps. I don't see him wanting to re-sign with the Caps if this happens. So
Maybe they'll back up the Brinks truck though. Maybe they're just if they're just committed to getting Ovi the goal record and not really trying to get another cup, they could just give him a buttload of money and say just pass the puck to Ovi on the power play.
that's true. You know what? Yeah, I could see it. I could see it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in terms of all of our mock trades, I think my Washington idea is my favorite out of what I came up with anyway. In
Mhm.
terms of what I could see being fairly realistic. Um, so yeah, I think up next we have Nashville.
Yeah. My Nashville trade won't happen. To be honest with you, it's just the only trade I can come up with where I was like happy with the result.
Yeah, interesting.
Um, so I've chickened to Nashville for Dante Fabro and Nashville's second round pick this year, which is 55th overall.
Okay, yeah. That was again originally what I went with was you got to get Fabro in the deal. But
Yeah.
then again with my other ones, I pivoted to prospects. But yeah, Fabro, if you're going for a roster player, is definitely the number one target on the Preds.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Fabro was Yossi's most common partner this past season. And unless you're like just tanking it in Nashville, you're gonna want to hold on to him. But the weird thing is so Yossi and Fabro played 604 minutes together. Um, but Yossi played on the right side of both McDonough and Luke Shen for a combined 608 minutes. So at 5-on-5, he's basically Yossi played the right side just about as much as he played the left. So if you do trade Dante Fabro, they've already traded McDonough, so like you're gonna play Yossi with Luke Shen all the time. That sounds like a nightmare. So I don't see them wanting to move Fabro at all. Um, and Fabro isn't a huge downgrade from Chychrun. I also don't think that Chychrun isn't a huge upgrade from Fabro. They're just very different players. Like Fabro, right shot, really solid defensive player. Um, so you throw in the 55th overall pick and hope that it kind of balances out there. But yeah, I don't think this makes much sense for the Predators. I think it makes a ton of sense for Ottawa. If you have Shabbat, Fabro, um, Sanderson, Zub as your top four, that's just it's kind of perfect. It's
Yeah, I
really,
would
really
love that for
solid.
sure.
So yeah, I'm just looking at the Preds. I was like, I have to go after Fabro. Like I just don't see this trade happening unless Fabro is included, which I don't think it makes a ton of sense for either team here.
I think Nashville as a destination for Chychrun makes a lot of sense, especially since they did
Hmm.
move Ryan McDonough. You have if you had Yossi, Fabro, and then Jeremy Lazon can play the right side as well. And then Chychrun, and then you also have Shen who can play second or third pairing, and they'll probably let Carrier go to free agency. But from there, who cares who your 60 is because the five guys I
Hmm.
named is already like really good. So I could see Chychrun being really good fit for the Predators, especially if they want an offensive D to take a bit of not to take ice time away from Roman Yossi, but to take a little bit of pressure off of him to kind of like the Erik Karlsson problem that we had back in the day where he was playing
Yeah.
30 minutes a night, and a bit of the Thomas Chabot problem too, where you just had to give him all the ice time because you didn't have anyone else good at his position. Chychrun could help with
Yeah.
that a little bit, so you don't have to overplay Yossi. So I could see Nashville really being interested. If I was in Steve Staios' position, I would push for Dante Fabro. But it
Yeah.
might not make sense for Nashville to do that. They might rather just
Yeah.
keep him. So what I
But on,
ended
on the
up,
flip side, though,
yeah.
sorry, just real quick on mine, real quick. On the flip side of that, another Eric Carlson comparison. If Nashville takes the San Jose route and tries playing Carlson and Burns together a whole bunch, like if they
Oh
try to
yeah,
just go all out, because like I said, Yossi played a lot of time on the right side this season. If you just move him to the right and play him with Chychrun,
that would be
that
crazy.
could be an unbelievable pairing. The rest of the time that your defense is on the ice is going to be a nightmare, probably, but like maybe they consider that. I don't know. I just don't think it makes any sense for them to get rid of Fabro, and I think it makes a ton of sense for Ottawa to want him.
Hmm.
So, but yeah,
Yeah,
just to say that maybe Chychrun, or Chychrun playing on the right side of Yossi as well is possible as well, because like I don't know. We'll see.
they can mix and match. They have a bunch of
Yeah,
guys that can play both sides, and they would get another one if they acquired Chychrun. But yeah,
yeah,
just because I can't really see them wanting to give up Fabro, I ended up putting for my mock trade the 22nd pick in this year's draft, plus either Tomasino or Kemmel, a couple of right wing prospects. I didn't do the due diligence to go look at their stats and see where they're at, but I think they both have like second liner potential. And again, with like what I was thinking earlier with Brink or any other winger prospect that I mentioned,
hmm
it's the type of kid who could come into your team kind of on the third line, start scoring a few goals, and then maybe as Giroux starts to drop off a bit, you can move them up the lineup into the top six.
yeah,
So I would be happy with either of them. I think it is a little bit of a expensive cost for Nashville, 22nd plus either of those guys. I could see it instead being one of those guys plus a second round pick instead. Um, it might have been too much of a asking price. It might be too much value going Ottawa's way if it was the first round pick plus one of those
If
guys,
it, if
but
if it's a second and a prospect, I'd be looking for someone
someone better as the
like
prospect.
a top end prospect, like a Matt Coronado type out
Yeah.
of Calgary, right? Like I'd be looking for like a no doubt, arguably should have been drafted in the top 10 of his draft class kind of thing. Not like, high on that, but like in that sort of 8 to 15 range, something
Yeah,
like
I,
that.
I
Like,
think Kemmel is close to that in terms of where he was drafted. I just don't
okay.
know. I'm going to look up really quickly what his stats were. Yeah, okay, so he played with Milwaukee in the AHL this season. I actually didn't know that. I thought he was still playing in Europe, but he came over to the AHL and he had 41 points in 67 games. So that's pretty darn good, I would say. He was 17th overall in 2022. So I
Okay.
would be
All
happy
right.
with
Yeah.
getting him. Tomasino is a couple years older, and he's been kind of like up and down in terms of the AHL and NHL, I think. So
Mhm.
I think he would be a little bit more riskier, but I think Kemmel is close to a blue chipper.
I like both of them as options. Yeah, I guess it's just a matter of figuring out what that pick is to balance it
Hmm.
to toss in with them. But
And
yeah.
in terms of what you mentioned for if it's a second round pick, you would want like a really like guarantee prospect coming back. The
Mhm.
final mock trade that we'll have here is one that is not a team that we both did trades for, but it's what I did in the NHL GM mode. So
Okay.
it goes along the lines of what you were saying, which is I actually didn't come up with this trade myself. EA's AI came up with this because I went in the game to the find trade option and clicked on it for Jacob Chychrun to see what the AI would offer me. And the Winnipeg Jets offered me McGrody and Montreal's second round pick, plus a guy, Jlikin, I don't know how to pronounce that, who was like a top 9 forward prospect. So the thing about McGrody is that he doesn't want to sign with the Jets. So he's going to get traded this week. And the reason he doesn't want to sign with the Jets is because they don't want to play him in their top 9 right away. They think that he would have to start off in the AHL, and he's saying, "Well, if you're going to make me do that, I'll just stay in college, or I don't want to sign with you anymore for whatever reason." So then I'm thinking if the Sens would play him on their team right away, grab him, send Chychrun over there, get a high draft pick as well with the Montreal second, which would be like 36th or 37th overall, I think. I think that I would be pretty happy with that. I don't know if it's realistic. McGrody might not be a guy that the Sens are really targeting, but if they're wanting a prospect, that's probably like the best prospect available.
Yeah, my inner hockey boomer is coming out a little bit right now, where this is a 20-year-old who's being told no for the first time in his life,
Yeah.
and he's having a fit about it. Like, I played really well in college, put me in the NHL in a scoring line. Like, dude, like, you have to, you know what I mean? Like,
I get what you mean.
part of me is like this, I mean, and like, I don't want to hold it against him. He's 20. We're all fucking like stupid when we're 20. Like, we're all really immature, and I get that. He's immature and a highly touted prospect in a multi-million dollar position eventually, probably. So like, I get why he's so full of himself. He's rightfully full of himself, but like a little bit, you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where like any prospect that has this reaction, I'm like, okay, well, like,
Yeah. It totally depends
I
on
don't know if I
if
want that energy.
yeah. I think if you
You know what
get
I
him
mean?
signed, I think if he would be happy to sign and the Sens really think that he's ready to go, then I think
Yeah.
it would be good. But I get why you would be apprehensive about it.
I mean, he's scored a shitload of points this
Yeah.
past season.
And I think he's a pretty
Um,
gritty, like two-way player as well.
yeah,
So
like
I
he's a
like that
great, I
element.
don't want to take that away from him. He's a great player, and I think he's destined for a great NHL career.
Maybe with all of our guys like Kachuk and Sanderson and Norris who have come up through the American college development path, maybe they can
Yeah.
convince him to want to play here. Like, hey, it's gone well for us and we got big contracts from this team, so
Yeah.
come join us.
I mean, that's also another way to look at it too, right? As like the Sens are like, yeah, we went straight to the NHL
Yeah,
because it was the Sens. This
yep,
is the Jets. This is a really good, deep team. Like,
yeah.
temper your expectations here, Rutger. Like,
He might
chill out,
he might
buddy.
look at the Sens and think, oh yeah, I can just walk onto that team. And if the Sens agree, if the Sens think, yeah, let's put him in our
Yeah.
third line right away, it could be a fit.
But to look at the Jets and being like, I belong here now, that's a little crazy.
It's tough,
Like,
especially when they're not even playing Cole Perfetti. Like, I think
oh
I think
yeah.
part of it is that he probably sees how they've treated Cole Perfetti and he doesn't like that. He doesn't want the next like 2-3 years of his career after signing to be like in and out of the lineup like he has been for Cole
Yeah.
Perfetti. But yeah, it's that just shows that it's hard to stick in that Jets forward lineup because it's so deep.
yeah, it's tough to be good on a good team. Like, I hate to break it to you folks, but like,
Yeah, it's
you know,
possible that he just ends up on a bad team instead, who can play him top six right away, like the Ducks or Sharks or Blackhawks. But
yeah,
I feel like we do have a little bit of room in our forward group where we could give him a chance, and I feel like Chychrun would be a good target for the Jets, especially because they just signed DeMello. We don't know if they're going
yeah,
to sign Brendan Dillon, and if they don't, then they'll have a bit of a hole on lefty.
yeah. That's very good point there. Because they'll
So
have
yeah,
what, like,
that's my sort of pie in the
Schmidt,
sky
yeah,
offer, where it's like I don't think this is likely. I don't think the Sens are necessarily going to be like an ideal team for McGrody to sign with, but I think that just because he would have been willing to sign with Winnipeg if it wasn't for like other reasons. Like it has nothing to do with the city, right? It's not like he doesn't want to play in Canada. It's possible that
right,
he
yeah,
would sign here. So I'm just throwing it out there as a possibility, but I definitely don't think that it's super likely. But I would be
yeah.
happy
It's
with it
not a great fit.
if it was able to happen. I would be happy with it.
Yeah, yeah. And well, on the flip side, maybe Winnipeg's just looking to bring back futures for him as well. They have a tight cap. They traded their first round pick for Sean Monahan this year, so maybe they're just looking to swap him for, a later first and maybe another
Yeah, I
pick as
think
well.
that
So who
might be the
knows?
more likely scenario is him getting traded
Yeah,
for a first in this year's draft.
yeah.
But yeah, I think
I'd
that's all
like
of
it
our
though.
mock
I think he's
trades.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which one do you think you would say is your favorite? I was saying the Washington one for me, or maybe McGrody, but I don't think that one's super likely. Which trade do you think
Yeah.
you like the most out of what we had here today?
I can't say Uyghur because it's not
Yeah,
going to happen.
too
I
unrealistic.
think my Fabro trade still feels too unrealistic to say. Um,
If it was possible, it would be up there for sure, but I don't know.
yeah. I don't think any of mine are especially realistic. I think maybe the Washington as well. My Washington TVR are first and second,
Yeah,
maybe, but I'm not thrilled about it, and that's why I think it's probably realistic.
that's what I think when making trades like this. I don't want to come up with ones where it's like, oh yeah, I would do this one, I would do this one. They would all be so great because
Yeah,
it's likely that it's not going to end up being that good, you know. So
yeah,
trying to keep the expectations a little lower, even though I do think some of the trades here today would definitely be really good for Ottawa. I'm trying not to get my hopes up too much.
yeah. And it's tricky and I'm trying to compare this to like the Allmark trade that just happened last night, right? I'm looking at it like, how do you look at it? Do you look at it like, you know, first round picks are worth a ton because dumping Corpusalo with that first got you Allmark, or is it going to be first round picks are easy to get because like Barkstrom got one, Olmark got one, like with other stuff. Like I'm not sure how to look at it. Like
Yeah.
what's the price for Chychrun going to be when you throw in a first?
I think it's hard to compare with the goalies. I think goalie values are just lower than
Yeah.
skater values in general. I think a top four offensive D like Chychrun will usually have more value than a goalie. But we'll see. We'll
Yeah.
see. I think you could say that the Olmark trade is a little bit of a blueprint because of the late first round pick, but then you don't have the value or the added value for Ottawa of dumping the contract. You're just trading a good player.
Yeah.
So then a first plus, right? I think that kind of makes sense.
Hmm. I think so too.
Yeah, but I guess that'll do it for today. Thank you so much for watching or listening if you made it this far into the video. We'll be back to react when a Chychrun trade actually does happen. Maybe before the draft, maybe after the draft, but of course we'll probably do some post-draft coverage too. Even if not a Chychrun trade, I do expect Steve Staios to be making some moves, maybe some minor moves as well. And free agency is in just over a week, so we're going to be ready for that too, pumping out more content for y'all on Game Over Ottawa. So subscribe and get ready for that.
Absolutely. I think the goal is to have like, obviously we couldn't do it last night because it was like late at night that the trade happened. But I think our goal is to try and do like same day reaction stuff for the
If
big stuff, at
possible,
least
yeah.
for, early on in free agency. So be sure to stay tuned.
Yeah.
Listen to Mod. Listen to what Mod tells you to do.
Yes, exactly. Listen to us.